Hello,
Okay.
everyone. I'll call the meeting to order. Just about Zoom rules. If we have any, keep comments with a mind that everything is being recorded and that best way to indicate your interest or a vote is by hand. We can see those more easily than a whole bunch of voices at one time. So that being said, we'll no seating of alternates this evening. All the regular members are here. Thank you, everybody. I read through the agenda, no, Paula, any suggested changes to the agenda?
No, there aren't any.
Okay. So no changes or additions to the agenda. The minutes of February 22nd, I read through them. They seem just fine. Any comments, corrections from anybody? I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes as presented.
Second that.
Okay, Alex, all those, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All aye, any abstentions?
Yeah,
Bob Howell,
Yeah, I was not present, so I can't vote.
okay. Is that the only abstention?
No, I'm going to abstain because my phone gave out halfway through the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
There's no nays, I would assume. Okay, the motion passes. Audience of citizens, is there anything anybody would like to bring up to us that is not already on the agenda? Okay, that said, then we're going to go into unfinished business, which there's nothing. Paul, am I missing anything?
no, you're not.
Okay. No new business?
No, I anticipate a subdivision next month, but no new business this month.
Okay, so we're gonna get right into regulation revisions. I know that you're capable of this, Paula, but I would appreciate you refreshing us as to where we left things as of last meeting. Or last discussion of this, of the watershed protection.
We just looked at it. We only looked at it just a little bit, and I pointed out that there was just a couple policy changes, that the regulations are very different from, I shouldn't say very different, they're reorganized and phrased slightly differently than our current regulations, just to make it a little bit easier for folks to understand and to be able to read easily. And I want to thank Dan O'Neill, who's on with us, because he helped an awful lot with saying, pointing out, this isn't all that, you can make this clearer. How about if we say this? So it was very, very helpful to have somebody to bounce things off of. So that the two changes that are actually policy changes are allowing folks, if they do a little bit more work than what they have to do, that they can bank that for a future project. They don't lose the benefit of it. For allowing I guess I would call it self-mitigating surface change totaling 120 square feet or less on a parcel, just by zoning agent approval instead of having to go through the full NAP worksheet. They would be able to, the zoning agent would look at it and make sure that they were mitigating the potential runoff for that, whatever surface is being added. One of the things that we've not talked about that came up at the last time we went into the nitty gritty of this, the commission did, which was a few months ago. There was some conversation about, well, maybe instead of just the 120 square feet at just in one shot, maybe they should be able to do that multiple times. Dan brought that to LMAC, and LMAC wasn't comfortable with that being sort of never-ending amount of usage. And one of the things that I thought of, which I incorporated in this language, is that you'd be able to do up to 120 square feet. So if you just wanted to put a little roof over your back porch, that might be 20 square feet. you would still have 100 that you could do something at a later date. So I don't know if that's a compromise between multiple occurrences and just the one time. And the other thing that we probably should look into is in 2013, 2012 and 13, it was a little bit before I got here. There was the Lake Ad Hoc Committee that was working on things on the lake, and they came up with wanting this 1 inch, the first 1 inch flush of stormwater should be treated with BMPs as a mandatory, that it needed to be in the regulations, and the commission put it in there. And I think we need to rethink it and perhaps talk to Dr. Cortman, our limnologist, about whether if it's being applied properly or if it even needs to be in the policy. Dan might have some comments on it.
Okay, Dan, you're muted.
There we go. How's that?
Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Sure. Yeah, so there's something in here that I'll just read it's a sentence to you. It's in section 21.4.5. I don't know if you get the existing regs there, but what it says is that in the course of compliance with the foregoing, for all new non-pervious surfaces greater than 100 square feet in area, the first 1 inch flush of stormwater shall be treated with a BMP as identified in section 21.4.7 of these regulations. Now, if you think of the overall concept is that you want to mitigate what you're building and make everything 10% better, your best management practices give you a whole bunch of choices of how to do that. For instance, you could put a dry well in and let the surface water run into that. You could take a bunch of lawn area and change that to woodland, and that would take care of it that way as well. And I'm aware of some projects where this little sentence became a problem because at best, you're forcing somebody to infiltrate 1 inch of water into the ground somehow, either in a dry well or maybe in a rain garden. When that may not be the best way or most cost-effective way to do it. And one way to think of it is that if let's say you have a driveway and what you intend to do is widen that driveway to make it twice as big. What this says is that extra driveway area, you have to take 1 inch when it rains, or calculate 1 inch of depth of water on that area and treat it with a BMP. So if you have a volume of water that you've calculated, that has to go somewhere. Either has to go in a dry well, or you have to scoop out a rain garden or depression in your yard for that to flow into and sit there and infiltrate into the ground. But other BMPs allow you to say, all right, I've got, I don't know what it would be, I don't know what the equivalent would be, but maybe I've got 800 square feet of lawn. I'm going to turn that into a mulch garden instead. And when you do the math on those two different runoff coefficients for phosphorus, you've mitigated this. Let me step back a little bit. If you're widening your driveway, in theory, you're taking grass, which has a good coefficient where the water soaks in, and you're changing the pavement where it just runs off. So you might want to take another 1,000 square feet of grass and then turn that into a better coefficient where more water will soak in there to account for your new paved area. And in that calculation, it's all based on area of your property. It's nothing to do with an inch of depth or more, and yet it accomplishes the same thing. So this little sentence forces a 1 inch calculation on something where you don't really need to do that at all. And it may force you to build something to accept an inch of water when you don't really need to do that, which can be an expensive proposition. So I think it's confusing in that way, and it may cause people to have to do stuff that they really shouldn't have to do.
Well, isn't inherent in the BMP coefficients that we use the assumption that that's what happens with the first 1 inch of water that hits those?
No, it's just how well water will soak into the ground on that surface area, whether it's 1/8 of an inch or 1 inch or 2 inches. It doesn't have anything to do with the depth of flow.
So I know where the 1 inch reference came from the ad hoc committee. And Dan, you were on that committee, weren't you?
I do. I mean, I was.
And Bob was on the committee. Who else who's here tonight was on the committee?
I
think it
was,
I'm sorry, who is that?
Vera.
Oh, Vera, okay. So we had, and all of you may recollect better what went on, but I think the idea was that Bob Cortman made reference at some point about how the worst phosphorus is in the first 1 inch of rainfall. And so that may be where that reference was dragged into this from, even if it's not necessary as part of the regulation. So Dan, what you're maintaining is the reference to 1 inch is not necessary because of the rest of the regulations, the way they're set up?
Yeah, and it's in the first 1 inch. If you have, what happens is that, phosphorus filters out of the atmosphere onto your impervious, onto everything, but on your impervious areas, it just sits there. And when it rains, the first half inch of rain will wash away a certain amount, and the next inch will, I guess, take care of most of the rest of it. And that's where the 1 inch is better than the 1/2 inch. And so you have the option of saying, for my impervious area, I can infiltrate just the first 1/2 an inch, and that gives you a certain amount of mitigation. And so maybe if you were going to do that, you infiltrate the first 1/2 inch and you dig a dry well just big enough with just enough volume to handle that, and it only gives you a certain amount of mitigation. So then the stuff that's not getting washed in that first 1/2 inch, that's part of your calculation where you're looking for other places on your property to do something more to take care of that. Or if you infiltrate the entire first inch, in other words, dig a bigger dry well so it all goes in there, then you're done. You don't have to look for somewhere else on your property to take care of that amount of phosphorus. So in a dry well where you calculate a volume, that is one of your best management practices. But if you have enough property or enough other things to do instead of digging a dry well, as I keep giving the example, if you have a lot of lawn and you just want to change that into a woodland, if you have enough area to do that, you don't have to put that flow of water hit your driveway into the ground, because it's being made up for by the fact that where you used to have lawn where a certain amount of phosphorus would run across the lawn and make it to the lake. Now you've changed it into woods, and maybe all that phosphorus there, it gets sucked into the ground there, even though your driveway is putting some into the lake that wasn't happening from that area of the yard before.
Okay. I need to think through this and reread the regulation and the context of the 1 inch reference, because I'm still a little vague, but I don't want to drag this out if everyone else is comfortable with understanding it.
It's
And
basically,
Dan, I might even call you to have a discussion about
yeah,
it.
well,
They need
no,
to understand
absolutely.
it in more depth, and I'm feeling a little obtuse, and I don't want to tie up the time tonight on it if it's just me.
And when the regulations say BMP, you're equating that with just a dry well. A BMP includes woodlands. And
Yep.
so but this would, the way it's written, it would need to, the wetlands or the woodlands would need to be right next to the driveway in your example, because it would have to flow directly into, that's what this is, shall be treated with a BMP. It almost sounds like it's whatever, if you're putting down 100 square feet of a driveway, it has to be, that has to be mitigated. And the only way you're going to mitigate that is either with a dry well right there, or woodlands right there, or some other system right next to it.
Well, that actually gives you not to belabor, but it gives you, that brings up two good points. So for instance, if you thought that meant now I have my new driveway, I need to put woodlands next to it so the water can run into it. That kind of points out how the 1-inch thing really doesn't have anything to do with what you're trying to accomplish, because how big does the woodlands have to be to handle an inch of rain?
Right,
It's not,
right.
it's just a different kind of surface, not a container. It just soaks in better. And this other thing I'm gonna say might really cause you to have to think, but these runoff coefficients for different surfaces really don't have anything to do with where the stuff is in relation to the lake, closer or further away. And you can kind of realize that when you understand that this stuff applies to houses that are in zone C, which might be a half mile away from the lake at all. And so when you're out there, you realize, well, I don't care if the driveway is closer to the lake or not, because look how far away we are. But the way it's calculated for no matter where you are, it's that same concept. If you had 100 feet of frontage and let's on the water, and let's say you had a parcel that was 50 feet deep, you could have a 50-foot by 50-foot paved area and a 50-foot by 50-foot grass area, and they would each be letting phosphorus run into the lake. Obviously, everything on the paved area goes right in. The grass area, some of it doesn't, and some of it does, but you could make that mix better by saying cutting out that middle third, make that all woodlands. Now you still have pavement, but less of it, letting phosphorus go in. You still got some lawn, letting some phosphorus go in, but not as much. And then the woodlands might just hold all of it. So you've made it better, even though you haven't necessarily intercepted water that's running directly into the lake. So it's not so much about proximity to the water, and it's not so much that one piece of your parcel, the water has to run towards another a BMP to make it effective. Best management practice could just be managing the surface area, except for the things where you care about that depth of rain. And those are a dry well. So obviously the water's got to fly into that or flow into that. The other thing is a rain garden, which is really a depression, kind of a retention pond, but a little depression that does have to be sited. How deep is your depression? How long, how wide? And then the water does have to flow into that to make it work. So all I'm getting back to is that this 1-inch concept really should just be a choice among others, as opposed to a shall, which is what it says here, to, you know, because
Okay.
it forces you to do something you shouldn't necessarily have to.
And there's certain things where obviously an infiltrator of some sort is really the only viable, or a rain garden, the only viable option. For example, roof runoff, where is it going to go? It's got to go in the ground one way or the other. There's no way to treat it on the surface unless efficiently that I know of.
Right.
So,
And,
okay.
and that,
I'm understanding the point you're making better and better as you
Okay.
explain it. I appreciate this. And don't forget that I think we have a UConn women's game this evening, 8 o'clock. No, you can
could be.
laugh, but I'm not joking.
No, hey, believe me, I know.
Okay. If anyone's offended by that, I don't care.
Oh, my.
That was recorded too. I'm sorry. All right. So the one of the points that we covered, there's probably one point here where lake management and my perspective personally may differ. The 120 square foot thing one time in the history of a property, that I'd like to see more room in case somebody wanted to do something down the road that was minor. And maybe if we allow 120 in its totality over multiple events, but maybe allow it once every 5 years or 7 years or 10 years or something like that, may be appropriate. So I'm just planting that as a seed for future discussion. I just see to say that it can be done one time if we're totally mitigating it, and you can never do that again. I'd like to see some room for another option there, if we could come up with a way to compactly and efficiently address that. And that's really the only point I would make. So I'd like to see some room for other changes in the future for people in the watershed.
They still would be able to, they would just have to do the nutrient allocation worksheet.
Yeah, but the implication I was making is that without having to do the nutrient allocation worksheet. So, and we don't want them to nibble at a big project to avoid it. You know, we don't want them to be able to do 120 square feet this year and 120 more square feet next year and not 120, but some room for another stab at this or multiple stabs over a long period of time would be, I think, advisable to build into the regulations. Because at their core, the nutrient allocation regulations have been successful because they're relatively easy to comply with. And I think that this is just one more thing that if we could make it easier for people to be compliant without having to go through a whole new worksheet. Because the assumption is if they have to go through the worksheet and they can't achieve a total 10% reduction on the property, then they can't do it. And that precludes their ability to make small improvements to their property over time in multiple small projects.
I think there's an important aspect to the BMP, and that's the educational part of it. As people go through the process, I think there's a better understanding of what the goals are of the entire process. So that, again, it's an educational element. If we let people do bits and pieces over a period of time and they're not doing the BMP, they're not doing the calculations, they're not invested in it, then I think we're circumventing a lot of the educational aspects that are opportunities that are important.
I hear you. I don't agree with that in that if they have to mitigate, they have to be probably aware of the concept of what mitigation is. And, you know, the whole idea of the nutrient allocation worksheet, I don't know that you're going to be able to readily be mitigating something without an awareness of what that mitigation process is, which is one of the components in the elements of the worksheet. So, you know, we're going to have different views on it, and we'll talk about it more. And as we get into this in the discussion phase after a public hearing, I don't want to cut off any discussion now. I'm just saying I have a different view of it than you, Bob, or you, Dan. Everybody's well-intentioned. We'll talk through it and ultimately come up with a decision at some point in the future. I'm sorry, Paulie, you want to keep moving through this?
I'm presuming everyone has had a time to read it, and I don't know if anybody else has any questions about it or something that was clear to Dan and I, and that our brains are different than everybody else's.
No, I really not. That's the only things I had thoughts on that would otherwise it's a wonderful product. Thank you for all the work.
Do you want what should be the review process? Should Dr. Cortman see it at this point or later, or?
I'd like to get his feedback about the 1-inch runoff, because the 1-inch run, you know, and what the recommendations that Lake Management has made. I mean, I don't know that we have to go back out to him for that. I don't see a negative aspect to that in any way. I appreciate the work Lake Management's done. What's anyone else's thoughts on the commission? Are you good with making the changes as recommended by the Lake Management? I'm more than comfortable with that. I would actually like to take the regulation as they've recommended with the changes, even the one that I don't agree with, and move that forward to a public hearing. And then, you know, I might be the only person who feels that way about the multiple stabs at the 120 square foot issue. If that's quickly going to go away. I'm not going to belabor that issue, but you know, in deference to their work, I'd rather put forward what they've recommended to go to the public hearing as they presented it.
This isn't a presentation from Lake Management. This is me. And I've been
Well,
working
you,
with Dan.
but we've had input
Okay.
from Lake Management,
Correct.
substantive input. And
I don't
I'd
know if
really rather go forward with things as they've recommended, because we've never gone wrong with following their recommendations.
I would just like to verify that they've recommended this, because I don't know if they've actually seen the final document, the final draft document.
Okay, we can verify that, however, or whatever process to do that. But I just, are we all good with that? So we'll just ask them to take a look and give us a go ahead and then move this to public hearing on a timely basis.
Sounds good.
Okay? Dan, thank you for everything. Bob,
You're
thank you.
welcome.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Okay,
really appreciate it.
no
you know,
problem.
That just goes to like when we have we have so many things that are a product of so much input from various sources. And I would tend to always be deferential to the people that have put the most time into doing the research and the hard work on something. And I really appreciate the work. So,
All right, you're quite welcome. Have a good night, everybody.
good night. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks.
Let's see. Next up is the draft revisions to section 21.5.
Yes, it's both of them, both changes are within the agriculture section. Actually, it's relating to section 21.5. I should rephrase that. One of the changes affecting this that I think will get to the same outcome that we were talking about 2 weeks ago was allowing a farm winery to also brew and sell beer and ale, can be handled, I think, through the section 9 definitions where we define what a farm winery is. I don't know if you guys had an opportunity to read this, but the definition of farm winery towards the end of it, just inserting the making of beer and ale as an accessory use, an approved farm winery is also permitted. And then changing the rest of the next sentence to say a farm winery may only sell these alcoholic beverages. So what's specifically mentioned above, including the beer, wine, and eau de vie, cider, beer, wine, produced in accordance with requirements of the state of Connecticut for a designated Connecticut grown farm winery and farm brewery, which are two separate regulations.
Okay,
That would, the distinction here is that this would allow a small farm winery to have a farm brewery as a accessory use. And that I think is 10 acres. So it'd be a little bit smaller. It's not just the large farm winery, but and I don't think we're going to have an influx of farm wineries in town. It would be nice, but I don't think we will. But the smaller farm winery also has separation distance and shorter hours and in our regulations and decent separation from properties, things like that. So I think we'd be fine with making that change for
Agreed.
both the smaller and the large farm winery.
so are we at a point where we can bring both of these to a public hearing? If not scheduling it now, obviously, because we want to go back to LMAC about the watershed regulations. You think at our next meeting, by the next meeting, we'll get some sort of feedback from LMAC and be at a point where we can schedule a public hearing at that point?
I don't know when LMAC meets. I believe it's the first Wednesday of the month. So they may have met already this month. I will follow up on that.
Yes, the first Wednesday of every month.
So that was last week. They must
Yep.
have met. Okay.
Yeah.
So they
I
won't
don't
meet
want
again.
to, I don't want to artificially rush this. So let's make sure that they've taken a look at that. And then by our first meeting next month, hopefully we'll have some feedback from them and then set a public hearing date for these two sets of regulations. That sound good to everybody?
Yes, that's
It's
good.
fine.
Yes.
The two could be separate. It's easier to do public hearings during COVID in that the advertising of it is easier to take care of than we don't have to publish in the newspaper. We have to just publish on the website. So it's easier. We could do them separately too.
I'm gonna leave that to you to decide how to
Okay,
handle that,
okay.
Paula.
All right,
Whatever you think is better, together
Okay.
or separately. If you want to go ahead, I mean, that way we just open and close one public. I'm gonna leave it entirely to you, okay?
okay, all right, thank
Good with
you.
that?
I will let you know how it works out.
Okay. Thank you. My goodness. Do we have anything else to do tonight?
Adjourn.
Make your popcorn for the
Well-
Yukon women.
Any communication or reports? Anything? Paula, there was nothing in
No.
the
No,
packet. Anything anyone wants to bring up?
Yeah, I do. What's going on with the state? Why do they keep taking down the beaver dam over on Route 66 when all they should be doing is cleaning out the drain underneath?
Good question. I have no answers. Anyone have an answer?
It's kind of crazy because the beaver dam is slowing the water down. When you let the water out of the beaver dam,
Yeah.
that's putting more water at the road. Otherwise,
also
we have to
noticed
take
that.
down. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Ever since they took it down back when we had our other town manager, I forget her name, they've had problems with that thing clogging. Because when they open it up, all the sediment comes out. Now it runs into that drain and then sticks build up. The beavers rebuild the dam and the water's not draining out the culvert underneath the road. So they come and take the dam apart again and they just keep doing it over and over. They took it out because they thought it was going to flood the road, but the dam is before the road. So all it's doing is keeping the water away from the road, not putting so much water down there. And it slows it down to go to the lake area.
And the area that the lake covers, the beaver dam covers, is much greater. In the back, if you notice, it goes way back now.
I
Or
know, that's where
did.
my house is back there.
Hmm.
But, it's kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
defeats the whole purpose. It's not very smart. Just clean out the culvert and it won't clog.
Okay, I don't have any answers on that one.
I don't know, it's all this environment stuff and we're talking about the lake, here you are flooding more water into the next step closer to the lake. So you're actually defeating your own purpose that the beavers are taken care of naturally.
I don't know what to say.
Oh, you guys are in the town hall more often. Tell the state to stop.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go there. With that said, anything else that anyone wants to bring up, audience of citizens, anything anyone would like to bring up to us?
I have just a couple comments. Last week, there was a mention of Gates going to investigate having an event place. And I mentioned St. Clemens. I have a history with St. Clemens. I used to go there for quite a number of things when I was at Wesleyan. We actually used to run workshops there when Wesleyan owned it. And then it became a private facility, 166 between Cobalt and Portland. When it became a private place, there were a lot of problems in the beginning of loud noise. You could hear it for a long way away, 3/4 of or more a mile, because I had a sailboat at the time. I used to keep it in the Cobalt Marina. I used to go down there on weekends and work on it in the spring. And then you could hear the music very clearly all weekend long down there. It was blaring away. They did correct a lot of that. And there was a problem. There were a number of accidents where people pulled out in the road and got into a fender bender. They did make improvements so that they cut the trees down so you could actually see the cars coming to pull out, which you couldn't before. They put lights there so people pulling out after dark could see the cars too, so it reduced the fender benders. It turned out to be quite a nice place, but I don't know, I've not been there in years to know if they've corrected the noise or not. But I went to a number of weddings there after it became a private affair, and they just blared as loud as they could play it. So it's something we need to watch if this project of gates becomes real. I actually drove Cards Mill to see how close, if you're driving up the road to the building, how close the entrance is to that property. It's very close to the crest of the hill, and it's very dangerous. They would have to move that driveway down the road a bit to make it a lot more safe.
Well, keep in mind that if there's a regulation change proposed by any private citizen, it would apply to the whole town or at least the whole district that it would be applicable in. And we have to keep it not just in the context of one property, but of any possible property. I know that addressing traffic volume, egress, safety, noise, those are all going to be key elements that we would likely have a discussion about and want to address in any potential regulation change.
Just for food for thought.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you. Anything else? Anything from the public at all? I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Is that unanimous? That's
Yes.
unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. Good
Okay.
night.
Enjoy the game.